The email that you sent with the, is that from the community members?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was on the phone with Nate,
Remember how to log in.
and my phone died.
Yeah,
So
so
I
she
didn't get to
sent
reconnect with him about what the situation is currently.
she sent that to me like just this afternoon, saying she was going to be presenting it to the board.
Okay.
But we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, you're in a
The
whole
stuff
new.
that you told me, aren't the,
Oh, I love them.
aren't the over here in the big leagues with Brian. Nancy? Yes. I'm gonna try here tonight, but I'm deaf in my right ear.
Oh.
But I mean, I guess I'm just gonna see how it goes.
Oh.
I can put turn this way and be able to hear you.
Well, why don't we just swap places with them then?
Do you want to? We could swap
I can
places.
go there.
Can you do that?
Yeah, let's swap Carrie
Probably would make more
because
sense.
it's new with new. Let's swap
Okay. Thank you.
Carrie with Liz.
Ready to go?
Money? I'm so happy you're down here. Did my daughter deliver money to you? Money? It's still in her backpack. What's it for?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 11th, 2022 school board meeting. We have a new school board that we would like to all introduce you to tonight. I would first like to acknowledge at our inauguration ceremony last Monday night, we had the Portsmouth High School Band perform live outside in the City Hall parking lot in the freezing cold temperatures, and they were awesome. So I just want everyone out there to know that we're very proud of our Portsmouth High School Band, as well as many other things that our school students do. But it was just wonderful to have that being there when we were all being inaugurated in the sub-zero temperatures. But it was a wonderful ceremony. It was a wonderful ceremony. I'm Nancy Noveline Clayburgh. I'm the chair of the school board, and I'd like to introduce Margot Peabody, who's the vice chair of the school board, and she and I are a team. We're working closely together to be the leadership of the school board for the next 2 years. So I'm delighted to work with Margot. Margot's going to introduce all the members of the school board.
Great. So I'll start all the way to my right. We have new member Elizabeth Barrett.
Hi there. Thanks. Nice.
Next to her is Lisa Rappaport,
Hello.
also a new member. Seasoned veteran Ann Walker. Moving to my left, we have Hope Von Ups, Brian French, returning, Carrie Nolte, Kim McGlinchey is our teacher rep, and Nick Dolan is our student rep.
And I would like to introduce our superintendent, Steve Zedravec. He's been our superintendent for several years now. So welcome, Steve. And our assistant superintendent, George Shea. It's wonderful to have George back. And unfortunately, Nathan Looney, our business administrator, is not with us tonight. He will join us on the Zoom. As well as Pip Clues, who is a returning school board member. She will join us on Zoom also. So welcome, everyone, and we'll get the meeting going with the roll call.
Well, I think you just did the roll call. I'm calling everybody here.
Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could stand, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the minutes from the December 14th regular meeting.
Move to approve.
Second. Will the new members vote on this?
I suppose with abstain.
Okay. If the new members don't mind, you will abstain from this because you were not board members yet. Okay. Okay, Steve, we have to do roll call because we have Pip on Zoom.
Liz Barrett,
Sustain.
Lisa Rappaport,
Abstain. Sorry.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Here. I'm yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Clayburgh.
Yes.
Hope Van Epps,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Abstain.
Okay, the January 4th organizational meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Move to approve.
Second. Okay. I guess we have to do the roll call.
We do.
And the new members, definitely, please vote on this.
Yes. Liz Barrett,
Yes.
Now we're here too.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Abstain.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Clayburgh,
Yes.
Hope Van Epps.
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Vote.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone in the audience here that would like to speak? No? How about anyone on Zoom? George, can you
If you're
give us that
interested
information?
if you're interested in public comment on Zoom, just raise your hand and we'll have you speak.
Thank you, thank you.
And we do have one. We have Kirsten Stahlkamp. So one sec, Kirsten.
Okay, now if I can just remind everyone, the rules of the public comment are you have 3 minutes to speak. We will remind you when you get close to the end. And also, we need to have your name and address for the record. So, Kristen, are you ready?
I'm ready, thank you. This is Kirsten Stahlkamp. I'm at 565 FW Hartford Drive. I would like to talk about the safety of the bus stops. There are 2 bus stops that have been added this year that I believe are new. One is the corner of Elwyn Road and Harding Road, and the other is Route 1 and Hoover. I sent the board a graphic, kind of a map of the Elwyn and Harding bus stop, with the red dot being where the bus stop is. This intersection is extremely dangerous. You have blind S-turns at the end of Harding going up towards Elwyn, and then in both directions traveling along Elwyn Road are blind corners that lead down hills. There are parking areas along Elwyn Road where people access the Urban Forestry Center trails, where cars are pulling in and out during heavy traffic times in the morning of people going to work, going to school. The kids are being asked to stand on this corner. There's no sidewalk. There's no crosswalk. There's no shoulder to the road. Right now, the ground is covered with snow. So in order to not stand in the road, the kids have to go over the icy snowbank and stand in the snow. Every parent I've spoken to says that this intersection isn't even safe for cars. I know a lot of residents don't even go out this way because it's so hard to pull out onto Harding or onto Harding or Elman Road, whatever direction you're going. The same is with the Route 1 and Hoover intersection. There are sidewalks for some of the way if you're coming from the Woodlands towards Route 1. But then when you get down to the end where Route 1 is, in order to wait on the sidewalk, you have to cross Hoover towards that new apartment complex to stand on the sidewalk. There's no crosswalk there. That's an extremely busy road. Cars traveling way too fast. You have the Dockham parking lot on one corner where people cut through because if you are on Hoover trying to make a left-hand turn onto Route 1, you're holding up people behind you because it's such a hard turn to make that people will cut through that parking lot. So we don't want kids waiting in the parking lot, but also to wait on the sidewalk on the other side, they have to cross a busy intersection with no crossing guard.
Kirsten, you have
No
20
shoulder.
seconds left.
No sidewalk.
Kirsten, 20 seconds.
Sorry?
You have 20 seconds left.
Oh, okay. I would love to see these bus stops eliminated. And also, we no longer have our bus stops in the Woodlands, which we would like to get back. The school district's asking the kids to walk 3/4 of a mile and farther to these new bus stops, which means traveling in the cold for longer, being subject to busy streets, cars traveling too fast, distracted drivers. I think that's way too far for kids to walk. These
Okay,
roads don't
Kirsten,
have
thank you very much.
sidewalks,
Your time is up.
shoulders.
Thank you very much. We appreciate
Thank
you
you.
taking the time.
I see no one else in the Zoom audience.
Okay. The public comment session is closed. Now we will go to special presentations. We have two items, the futures and our budget. So Steve will begin with the presentation about futures.
Nancy?
Yes.
When we had spoke previously, you had mentioned having an opportunity to address public comments possibly
Yes.
after public comment. And the bus stops was something I wanted to address. I did
Yes, we're going to
address-
do that later on in the meeting.
Okay.
We have it so that it will be addressed later on in the meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, so I would like to introduce our new Futures Coordinator. Jenny Taberski is with us. And Jenny is, again, new to us this year, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit and tell you a little bit about the Futures program. I know many of you are well aware of its intent, its purpose, its success, and some of you may not be, so I figured Jenny could give you a quick overview. And I would also call to your attention later in our agenda, you have two items. The Futures is sort of guided by the Futures Advisory Board, which is one of your committee assignments, as you may know. And that board essentially does not have the authority to make certain decisions, change to their bylaws, and approval of new members. So they make recommendations that come to you. And so you have two recommendations from the Futures Advisory Board. One is for two new board members, and the other is for some changes to the bylaws of Futures. And so if you have questions while Jenny's here, by all means, you can feel free to ask them. So, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. My name is Jenny Taberski. I'm the program coordinator for Futures. I was born and raised in Portsmouth. Actually, Mrs. Walker was my 4th grade teacher. I'm a proud graduate of Don Darrow, Portsmouth Middle School and the high school, and I'm thrilled to be back working in the Portsmouth school system. Though most are likely familiar with Futures, I did just want to start with a brief history of the program. For those who may not know, Futures was established in the mid-1980s by local businessman and philanthropist Joe Sawtelle. Mr. Sawtelle's vision was for a program that would provide both mentoring and financial assistance to those who aspired to pursue higher education but lacked the necessary resources. With the first graduating class of 1993, Mr. Sawtelle's vision was realized and the Futures program was born. Currently, we have 24 high school students actively engaged in the program. Each month, we meet by grade level to discuss a different curriculum related to college and careers. The curriculum was actually created by a Futures alumna. She allowed me to identify her. Her name's Hannah Allen, and this was part of a summer internship that she had with Futures. She completed this past summer. She's about to start her final semester at UNH, and she has plans to continue on to earn a master's degree in education. The curriculum's fantastic. She did a great job, so I'm very grateful to her for her hard work on that. But to give just a brief example of what's included in the curriculum, for the month of January, the freshman class will be discussing different paths in college, so associate's degree, bachelor's, master's, etc. The sophomores we met today, they are working on writing sample resumes to go alongside the cover letters they had worked on in November. The juniors will be meeting with current high school seniors to talk through the college application process and ask questions about that. And the seniors will be going over various local scholarships and that they may be eligible to earn and how they would go about applying for those scholarships. So the primary focus of the curriculum is always to offer mentorship and to ensure that all students have the knowledge and confidence to successfully navigate college once they're admitted. So at this time, we currently have 4 freshmen, we have 7 sophomores, we have 6 juniors, and 7 seniors. One of our seniors has actually already been accepted to 3 colleges, so that's very exciting. And as of now, we have 21 college students who are all at various levels of completion in their degrees. Given the nature of the last few years and the rapid shift to remote learning, our college students have really proven to be extremely resilient. We have students kind of all over the place. We have students at UNH, Great Bay Community College, Arizona State, Lakes Region Community College, Babson, Endicott, Bates, North Shore Community College, Syracuse, University of Montreal, RIT, UNC, and Hawaii Pacific University. We're anticipating at least 6 college graduates this year, which is really phenomenal considering the hardships of the last 2 years. And we have students who are also planning to continue on to a master's degree, either right away or within the next year after they graduate. We also do currently have a Futures alumnus who is in medical school, so very impressive. I was reviewing the alumni statistics that were compiled by our previous coordinator, Amy Berger, and it struck me that Futures will graduate this year its 30th high school class in 2022. So considering the fact that many of our graduates from the program attended college and entered the workforce prior to the widespread use of email or the internet, there may actually be more Futures alumni who went on to complete a degree than we're aware of. So compiling an accurate and updated alumni database is something we're actively working on as we have more students that graduate as well. But if anyone sees this or is watching this and is a Futures alumni, please email me so we can add you to the list. But based on the knowledge and information that we do have, from 1993 to 2017, 224 students started the Futures program. From 1993 to 2017, 170 of those students continued on to start college. And of those 170 students, 110 have graduated from college. So that gives Futures overall a 64% graduation rate, and the national average is 60.4%. So considering the fact that our students are first-generation college students, that makes this statistic even more meaningful. Our students, who often have considerably more barriers to their success, are graduating at rates above the national average. This is a testament not only to the hardworking and dedicated nature of our students, but also to the importance of this program. Alongside mentorship, Futures has also been able to provide more than $2 million in award funding to students over the past 30 years. The generosity of local businesses and individuals continue to allow Futures to provide significant financial support to students. And within the last 2 years, we also began fundraising efforts. So starting with Giving Tuesday in 2020, and then followed by participation in New Hampshire Gives this past year and Giving Tuesday 2021. We are really continuing to explore what other fundraising opportunities could allow in terms of financial support for our students. And with the support and direction of our advisory board, I'm really excited to see where these opportunities could take Futures. We are also excited to welcome 2 new advisory board members pending school board approval. James Fahey is a 2014 graduate of PHS and 2018 graduate of UNH. James is a Futures alumnus, so he will offer a very unique perspective, and we're really looking forward to his insight as we continue to explore how to expand the program to support more students within the community. Liz Nickerson will also be joining us on the advisory board, and we're excited to have Liz joining us because she is one of Joe Sawtell's granddaughters. So she is deeply connected to the program, and her family history with Futures, as well as her interest in supporting continued fundraising efforts and alumni networking, will be really huge assets to our board. And finally, I want to thank the school board for its support of Futures and our students. I believe it's crucial for the longevity of the program to continue to have a school board member actively participating on our board. So we appreciate those who have served and will serve in the future. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Does anyone have a comment or question? Yes.
Based on your description of the freshman-sophomore engagement, I'm just curious if there's opportunities for folks to be engaged in the program later, or if they all have to sort of be identified in freshman year?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Or what if someone's sort of kind of coming about in their junior year and is really passionate and can use support?
Absolutely. So the way the process is right now is we do a selection in the 8th grade year at the middle school, and then we also do another selection process in 10th grade sophomore year. So that's our way of trying to find students who maybe their family circumstances have changed. So they maybe weren't financially eligible before, but now they are. Or they weren't necessarily mature to the point where they really were focused and dedicated toward higher education in 8th grade, and now they're in 10th grade. So it's a little bit closer, a little bit more imminent. I don't think there's any reason why we wouldn't consider a junior if the circumstances were right and we were able to support that student. And we're kind of in the process of talking about what the application process will look like in the future. So.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation and all that information.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.
Liz?
Excuse me. Is there a reason why there's only 4 freshmen versus like the 7 or 6 before? Is that dependent on, I mean, obviously there's qualifying factors, but is that dependent on monies available, or what is, and also I guess to follow up, what is the, what does Futures currently provide for funding? Is it still full funding, or where are we at?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the number of students in each grade level, it honestly really depends on the applicant pool, which unfortunately has been smaller and smaller. So we're really working to try to get the word out as soon as possible to the schools, and just make people aware that we're here and that we're here to help. In terms of the funding, starting with this graduating class in 2022, Futures awards each year for students anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000, and that goes toward unmet need based on federal financial aid, what their estimated family contribution looks like, as well as any local scholarships, grants, things like that.
And as far as recruiting, I mean, so it's an applicant pool. So is there active recruiting in, I believe, so I was in the Futures program, and I unfortunately had some circumstances with sports injuries and whatnot, where I ended up moving schools and didn't come back into the program. And so I've heard that barrier has sort of been taken away. But I guess I'm wondering, I believe that I was scouted out to some extent because of test scores in maybe 7th grade. Is that still happening?
So the middle school teachers, obviously I'm new, this is I'm only 3 months in, so I haven't gone through the 8th grade process, but my understanding is that middle school teachers are huge advocates for our program at the school, which we are extremely grateful for. They know those students, they've seen them come up 6th, 7th, 8th grade, so they really are the ones who are speaking to, academically what students are capable of, and if they feel like they'd be a good fit for the program. Unfortunately, the financial aspect is not one that is knowledge to everyone, so that's something where the families would really need to be aware of the program and what our financial ranges are for acceptance, and really kind of work with those families as they identify themselves.
Okay, and my last question, as far as the 30th year, I mean, that seems like a great opportunity for some sort of promotion. Is there anything that the board could do, or have you thought about anything as far as using that to some sort of advantage to fundraise?
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely are this last year was our first year in terms of fundraising efforts and really kind of putting that forth. So I think this year, with the help of the advisory board, we're really talking about what we can do to leverage past fundraising success to this year. So that's certainly something that I believe the advisory board of Futures may be looking to create a subcommittee to that effect. But you're absolutely right. We should leverage the 30th year. It's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yes.
Margot?
Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah.
Always super helpful. Liz was getting at this, but my follow-up is there a max capacity to the number of students Futures can support? Are we at capacity or is there?
That's a great question. I don't believe there's any set max capacity, but for us, typically what I've seen over the past few years is that 7's kind of the max comfortably to be able to not only financially support students, but also the mentoring being able to kind of balance that one-on-one with the group. So 7 is really the max that we're seeing in terms of that. But as you can see with the freshman class, that leaves us room for potentially adding 3 more students as sophomores. This year for our sophomore applications, we only had 2 applicants and we were able to accept both. So we really will review any application as long as people meet the financial requirements and the academic and they're well recommended by teachers. We'll certainly review the applications.
I just have a quick follow-up,
Yes.
if I may.
Yes.
So when you say that it isn't being well communicated, I'm just curious if you can say a little more about where you think the breakdown might be. Is it that teachers are recommending kids and then the families or the students aren't following through? Or I'm just curious if there's an opportunity to do outreach for a particular, person along the way in that process.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest aspect is the financial, which is not, we're not made privy to in terms of the families. So we really can just get the word out to everyone and hope that it resonates
Gotcha.
with a child or a teacher recognizes that a child might fit into the criteria. That's where there's really that fine line of what are we able to know. So yeah, I mean, I just would encourage talking about it as frequently as possible. I'm going to be working with the middle school to hopefully get into classes, depending COVID how that works, but to get into classes to talk to students. I'm hoping to bring one of my future students with me who's currently in high school to talk to the students in middle school to just kind of, be a motivator, so to speak. But yeah, it's really just the financials are tough to get people to talk about that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, just one more follow-up. Steve, is there any way that we could prevent that barrier by using free or reduced lunch or any sort of, demographics of locales or anything that, because I get that there must be, there's some sort of financial piece that the parent needs to fill out a form or do something, and that's the step that we're missing. I don't know, I guess, is that coming up a lot where you're saying, hey, your kid qualifies and then the parent's not following up, or?
Well, we don't, sorry, not to interrupt
no,
you.
go ahead.
We don't necessarily know if they qualify because that's the financial, basically for students to be eligible, they need to be at 200% or below of the federal poverty line. So that's family income. And so the tough thing we're having this year is that everyone gets free lunch at school. So free and reduced lunch is not necessarily an indicator. People aren't needing really to apply for it unless they're trying to get access to other programs or other funds. So that is really, I believe that maybe was something that was used in the past, if I'm correct, Steve. But
Yeah, I would say, Liz, you bring up a good point, which is this is a constant struggle, honestly, to try to break down some of those barriers. We have the same thing with the Opportunity Fund that we've established for students K-12. And so we have talked about that, is how can we help reduce that? Is there a sort of just a one-time validation, if you will? Because Futures is a post-secondary program, obviously the financials matter in terms of the FAFSA and other ways parents have to evidence their financial status to an institution. So those things tie in a little bit, but it's a really important point, one that we've chewed on quite a bit. And I would say also, reiterating the point Jenny made, which is that in eighth, one of the things that we did when we instituted the sophomore selection process was really done because in eighth grade we were seeing, as Jenny said, a lot of students that their head wasn't wrapped around college at all, and even their parents, for that matter, weren't necessarily keyed in as much. And so trying to also educate all parents, and this goes right up to our CTE programs, everything else, what are those post-secondary opportunities, and to communicate those earlier and earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we have been talking about, and I'm actually, on Thursday, I'm attending a committee to talk a little bit about just different opportunities there are in terms of helping families in need within the area, just sharing, honestly, just sharing resources. So I'm excited to attend that through Great Bay Community College. So I'm going to be attending that and just kind of hoping to share resources, get the word out. We had also talked about possibly connecting with Portsmouth Housing Authority to just partner with them and maybe get information out into different neighborhoods. So kind of just throwing a bunch of ideas out. So if anybody has any and would like to recommend them, that would be much appreciated. But thank you, yeah.
Yes, Hope.
I was just thinking maybe there could be a spotlight in one of our mini newsletters that we have or something like that to highlight your work and who you are and being new to the district.
Yeah.
I would definitely think that's something that could be added.
Okay, that would be great.
Yes, Kerry.
For either one of you, where does the 200% of federal poverty, where does that guideline come from for the program?
From the advisory board.
Okay.
I believe that's in the, is it in the new bylaws or?
Yeah, I believe so. It's been, I'm not sure when the last time it was adjusted, but that's been sort of the standard.
And that was raised to be able to accommodate more people, to be able to have a bigger applicant pool within this community. So I that's what it has been since I've started.
Great. Well, I'd love to join you for the futures meetings as well. And I'm a faculty at UNH. Just curious if you've had success in getting folks into some of the first generation sort of scholar programs. I know many universities have them, but if any of your students have gotten into those.
That's a great question. I don't know as much about that since I am just getting to know the college students. And a lot of them who are at UNH are close to the end of their program. But I know there is, with New Hampshire schools, the tuition, I believe it's tuition and fees are $10,000 a year for certain families who qualify. So that's certainly something I'm talking about with the students. But no, I'm not familiar with those programs, so I'd love to talk to you more about that.
Yeah, and I would add, Terry, one of the things that I think is very powerful about the Futures program is connecting to these other opportunities. Essentially, as Jenny does and as her predecessor did, walking students through many scholarship opportunities, other financial aid opportunities, so that by the end of the day, when kids are graduating Portsmouth High School, their need is lessened to a great degree by the other ways. So that is one of the programs that I know that we have been aware of. But you know, grant opportunities, other things that a lot of these students are eligible for, but often need the guidance to carrying through different process steps of the application.
I just have a quick question.
Any other questions from
I
anyone?
just have, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I just have one. Are you tied in to the college presentations that are going to be, or that normally, I don't know with COVID, but normally takes place in the evenings with parents at the high school?
With the college counselor?
Yes.
Not necessarily. I do attend, or I did this year attend I Am College Bound Day where students apply to the New Hampshire State Colleges, but I am not tied to that, no. That tends to be usually more where the college counselor will pick up that kind of beginning part of senior year, and I'll help students and parents in terms of applying for schools or applying for FAFSA, but really it's more the second half of the year when their financial aid packages start to come in that really will meet a little bit more closely.
Yeah, I've attended it before. I just was thinking that it would be nice to have you introduced to parents. I know that you might work with students, but students don't always communicate with parents on the resources that are available to them or really fully understand that. So even if you weren't there, if they could make an introduction to the program of follow-up, that there is one more component, right, and how people can get involved. I just think it's the audience that you could potentially be looking for if you can't identify it through financial means.
Yeah, absolutely.
It might be a good place to
Yeah,
get the word out.
definitely.
Yes.
And then
Liz.
lastly, just a few more. Are we still doing futures banquets for the new students when they're when they come in middle school? That was sort of a thing of my time. It was, but I think I probably had a group of there's probably a larger group than what's coming in now for the grade. But it was kind of like a nice thing. It was sort of, it felt important. And so I guess I just wondered if that was still happening.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously with COVID, probably not. But,
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. To the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been happening, most likely due to COVID. Yeah,
Okay,
so I'm
so
not
it's
sure
more of
if
a COVID issue than a overall, or?
I believe so, yeah. All I know is from, when I started, which was at the end of September. So I started kind of hit the ground with the current freshmen, and then I started working newly with the 2 sophomores that were accepted in mid-November. So I haven't really gone through the process of 8th grade, meeting them, introducing them to the program yet.
Okay. And are these all students that are just phenomenal in school, or are there students that are still that are smart, phenomenal, but are struggling? Because I feel like when I was in Futures, a big part of Futures was actually trying to carry these kids along, or me and other students along, and make sure that they were doing well in their classes, and check in with them and make sure things were going well. So is that still a piece of it, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, as with any program, there's a range of students and, their academic abilities. What may be really easy for one student is going to be difficult for another, and vice versa. So my job is really to just be there to support students, communicate with teachers. There's so many softwares that we have available to us, which is great. So I can really keep an eye on how things are going for students. And I'm gradually, slowly getting to know the students. It's tough with scheduling, but I've been trying to schedule one-on-one appointments with students so that they can get to know me and I can get to know them as individuals. So yeah, absolutely. The academic aspect is certainly still part of it.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Kim?
I don't have a question, I just
Or
have a comment. The number that you said for your first-gen college graduation is super exciting. You said 64%, I believe, because
64%.
the
Of what we
national
know.
average is 27%.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I just was looking at the overall collegiate
Yeah,
graduate level.
nationally.
Yeah.
In this region, it might be a little different, but when we think about our equity goals and our true goal, right, is to not just get them through our system, but to have the wheels to carry them through the next level. We know how important a college education is in this world.
Absolutely.
So I think that's so exciting to
Yeah,
hear.
I agree. Awesome.
Okay. I would just like to say that I was on the Futures Board at one point, and we went to a meeting one month, and it was Amy at the time. She made the announcement that Mrs. Sawtelle had passed away, and she opened up the bank statement that day, and there was a $500,000 contribution that was part of Mrs. Sawtelle's will. So she had no idea that that was coming, so that was kind of exciting. Anyway, the Sawtelle family, philanthropic, kind, loving, wonderful people. I'm thrilled to see one of the Sawtelle grandchildren on the board. I think that's very important. This program is unique in the United States. It doesn't exist. There just isn't a family that put together this program and presented it 30 years ago to a school district. We're very proud of this program. It's very, very, very exciting for Portsmouth. Now, do we include Greenland, Rye, Newington, Newcastle? Okay, I thought we did. Okay, good. So
Absolutely.
those students are asked to participate if they're eligible.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that if people looked at our board committee assignments, we're proud that Liz Barrett and Kerry Nolte will be on the board, the Futures Board.
Excellent.
So we'll let them know when the meetings are, and I think there'll be 2.
The next one.
When is the next one?
Have a meeting on the 19th, so next Wednesday. So if I can get each of your emails, I'll certainly add you to the list and get you all the documents over.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And good luck.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is our budget.
Yes.
Turn it over to Steve and Nathan.
Yes, Nathan is on Zoom, and he will jump in. George is going to put the presentation up on the screen. This afternoon, I emailed you these slides, so you have them also. And at your place is the binder that Nathan will orient you to in a moment in terms of the organization, et cetera. This truly is a draft beginning. This is a particularly exciting year for the budget with some new opportunities, and of course, how do we continue to respond to the last 2 years that we've had. And so I think I would imagine the discussions in the budget are going to be even deeper and richer this year. So I guess I say that in full expectation that this is a starting point and that this will likely change and adapt as this board dives into the budget and discusses priorities. So, of course, as a district, one of the things, as Nancy talks about points of pride, we do pride ourselves on a personalized approach to learning in a rich educational environment that focuses in on the whole child, arts, athletics, academics, and to the point of the Futures program and the goals and what Kim was talking about, that we do graduate students who are prepared, who are career and college and citizenship ready as they leave our system. And so to the budget timeline and process, this is only to point out that we have, while this is the first time to bring the intro budget to you, for the last couple of months we've been working on the budget. It starts with the budget makers. And it's not a just sort of pass along last year's budget to next year kind of proposition. We have them examine their past spending practices. We have them examine their past needs against their future needs and really start from the ground up in all cost centers to what are the needs this year for the budget. So we go through a process of meeting with every budget maker. That would be every person in charge of every cost center in your budget, and to discuss line by line what those needs are, what their wishes are, and oftentimes, if we had to, what their priorities are, because we know there's never a year where we just can get every single thing we want, so we do need to talk about priorities as well. But what you'll see, and I think the board had asked for this, is a even more unfiltered version of the budget. That is to say, we're going to talk to you about all of the requests that we've received from budget makers to this point. And so just we'll go through the series. We're going to come back to dates and timelines a few times, but we're going to be meeting every week for the next few weeks and really diving into the budget, and we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation. But next Tuesday will be a public hearing, but also our first budget work session. And then even in our regular meetings like tonight, we'll take a dive into certain aspects of the budget as well, and that's something that we can talk about as we set agendas and look at what the priorities for discussion are. Importantly, I'll make note that we have 2 public hearings for the public to come talk to you. The first one is next Tuesday. We usually put one at the very beginning of the process and then one towards the end of the process so the public can weigh in on just overarching priorities and then can weigh in on some of the potential decisions the board is making. I would say the school board is unique in having 2 public hearings for this, so I do think that opportunity for public engagement is there. And of course, those will be in-person and Zoom opportunities for the public. I would just call our attention again. I'm not going to go through in any great detail on the goals, but which one? Let's click forward. But as you know, all of our work is driven by the goals we have. Those are equity, opportunity, community, and student wellness. And so those goals, I know we took a deeper dive in our summer retreat around those goals and even discussed some of the budget priorities that could be associated with those goals. And yes, on your school board agenda, in fact, now we're going to try to keep a constant reflection and reminder on our goals, so you have those on the back of your every agenda going forward. So some of the data. So we have, every year we look at our enrollment trends, because enrollment is a key driver for us in terms of staffing, in terms of need, not just the numbers of students, but also the special populations and other groups of students we need to perhaps put a little more resource towards. I guess I would give you the highlight of the projection we have, and these come from NESDEC, the New England School Development Council, which does school enrollment projections for many districts in the region. And they would suggest that our population would slightly decrease over the next 10 years. I guess I would put a little cautionary note in here that this does not contemplate development that's on the forefront, perhaps. And in Portsmouth, as you know, there is some coming forward, and exactly how that might impact our school-age population. We do interface and meet with the planning director. That position has been in flux this year, but just to try to understand in the upcoming number of years what developments are planned for Portsmouth, what schools they might impact, and keep an eye on those numbers. So, so we don't see drastic change from year to year, but we do see this slow, gradual projected decrease if you look at our elementary school population. I would make a note that if I go back a year to their projection, they projected fewer kindergartners than we actually have this year. So, again, these are usually the most accurate in the closest years and then become less accurate as you try to take them out to the 7th through 10th year. So the budget book orientation, I'm going to sort of skip this and let Nathan come back to it for what your book looks like. I'll come right into some of the drivers in your budget. Last year, for those of you with us last year, you do recall a major driver for us was a huge increase in the retirement contribution rates. And those rates are set for every 2 years. And so we are fortunate that this year there is no change in retirement contribution rates. We would expect a change and adjustment next time for FY24. And health insurance also, as I think many of you know, we use a 10-year rolling average of contribution to the city's health insurance stabilization fund. And that 10-year average last year was 5.4%. This year is 5.4%. Last year, we did have an adjustment at the end of the budget process where I think the city council was trying to zero in on an overall increase to the budget. They did end up reducing the health insurance contribution we made by about $170,000. So I would make that note, but that's not assumed in this current proposal. So we have some major drivers of the current budget. Staffing, of course, is a major driver. We have some collective bargaining that's going to be going on with some of our larger units, in particular teachers. And so those costs, as we'll go through some of the salary numbers, are unknown at this point, but they certainly will be an impact. The health insurance, as I just said, student transportation, we'll come back to this conversation about buses and bus routes, but one of the things, and I'll let Nathan describe it later, that we did is we reduced the overall number of buses this year. And that has worked out pretty well for us because we have the buses doing 2 runs, elementary and then middle and high school. But it's definitely made some constraints on their time to get, particularly in the morning from elementary to high school. So we are trying to respond to those pressure points. We would anticipate a request to add back 1 bus, which would help us certainly in the long term alleviate some of that pressure. And then special ed out-of-district tuitions, as you'll see in the cost center 165, these are increases that we expect, and as I think many of you know, the out-of-district tuitions can easily jump into the 6-figure range for any individual student. And these are students who need a very specialized program determined by all of the special ed laws we have to follow in their IEPs and the decision-making points for that. So I'm actually going to suggest Jeanette Souther be one of your first presenters for your budget, because a lot of the, as we get to some of the requests, you'll see are related in the area of special education. And then lastly, a considerable driver in the increases you'll see is a restoration of about $300,000 in operating costs that we actually reduced in last year's budget. Again, in response to some of the pressures of where we wanted to get to in proposing a budget, and also the realization that at the time the CARES Act funds, now the ESSER funds, those do impact and can impact some of the expenses we have. So we still believe will be comfortable this year in getting through the FY22 budget, but in looking at FY23 in the first cut, we've restored the $300,000 in multiple cost centers. And again, Nathan can talk about how we went through some of those reductions last year. So I'm going to just present quickly 2 scenarios for you. The first would represent what we call a continuing service budget. This is a budget that basically takes all of our programs and services and moves them forward 1 year and adjusts for things that we did have to change in this current year after we approved the budget last year. So if you look at this, just to keep all of the staffing that we have and move them forward 1 year, salaries would increase by about 2%. Again, that is not inclusive of any contract COLA raise that could come in negotiation. That's typically held in a contingency in the city budget until negotiations are done, and then we filter them into the department budgets. The benefit increases run at about 3.4%, and again, that's primarily the general increase as compared to salaries for for health insurance, retirement, et cetera. And again, that $300,000 contributes to a fairly large increase percentage-wise in our operating budget of over 10%, for a total budget increase of 3.7% for a status quo continuing service budget. The FTE count does jump up 1, and the reason for that is in our PEEP program, we have had to look at incremental increases in paraprofessional coverage for some of our students, and those were things that we had to do in response to students moving into our preschool program this year after we approved the budget last year. So we actually are up 1 FTE already because of those pieces that we had to add. In our initial proposed budget to you, as a highlight here, you can see that we're just under 5% overall increase. And what we did here, as I'll go through, is we included many, not all, but many of the requests made by budget makers into this first draft budget. Because those position numbers are going to increase, as I'll show you, we're up 3.8% in salaries, 4.3% in benefits, still up over 10% in operating for the reasons I've already said, which again is about a 4.9% increase. Our FTE count, though, as you'll see, is different. We're up now a total of 8.94% or 8.94 FTEs from this current year. And what I'll do is I'll detail quickly what those are. In addition to the increase in para coverage and PEEP, we have a request for an additional guidance position at the middle school, in addition to a math tutor position. And by the way, I'm running through these. All of these things are what we're going to dive deeper into when we get into the discussions with budget makers. So I'm purposely not going through rationale for each in depth. The athletic director, we know our MOU with the city is ending, and so we'll contemplate adding our own athletic director in the budget. I know we've talked about BCBA. This is the same BCA position we haven't been able to hire yet because we haven't found qualified candidates. It's still an add to the budget we would like to make. Increase in reading, case manager at the elementary level, as well as additional speech pathologist coverage, and occupational therapist up 50% position, and a social worker, which again will be probably servicing multiple schools. So some of these things have come out of obviously post-pandemic need that we've seen, as well as long-term need, particularly around some of the guidance and social worker services. So I'd call out some of the positions that in your binder, in your budget currently aren't included, but are important for us to talk about. And again, our discussions over the next few work sessions would be to prioritize everything and look at what's going to eventually be in your proposed budget. So we actually had a request for 2 case managers at the elementary school. We have worked with Jeanette to think about maybe taking a priority of 1. Our elementary principals have talked about how they're going to expand the outdoor ed work that we've been doing, and so would contemplate some constellation of a position that could help move that educational piece forward. This is back to 2 years ago now. You had a proposal for 2 positions that would service elementary world language. So I only put that on the list because while it wasn't a particular request new this year, it is something that you've talked about. I'd share one little bit of interesting news, which is that we actually, through the work primarily of one of our high school world language teachers involved with teaching Italian, Joseph Marquette, we actually have a connection with the Italian government. And they've, we'll talk more when we get to that discussion, but essentially would love to fund for us some speaking of Italian, particularly in our elementary schools. So we're very excited about this possibility. And I think what came out of our even when we had a committee to talk about elementary world language was it's more important that they have a language. It's not necessarily what language it is so much as that getting used to speaking a different language. So it's something we'll come back to and talk about a possibility. Interestingly, back on March 13th in 2020, the day it all went crazy, I was supposed to go to Boston with Joseph to the Italian consulate, and that trip got quickly canceled. So, but behind the scenes, we were still talking about it, still working. So there it is. I know in our retreat this summer, the board had interest also in talking about a diversity, equity, inclusion director, as well as a communications or PR position. So I do want to bring those things up for you again, just to try to put together all of the things that we've talked about. Some additional budget considerations. As you know, ESSER funds is an ongoing conversation. Nathan will detail for you much more in terms of where we are with that in a subsequent meeting. I think that's part of our retreat, in fact, when we get to that, and to really get into a much finer level of detail around those funds. He'll also talk to you about an interesting opportunity we have this particular year in adequacy aid, which is something we don't typically get from the state, but it looks like we will. And aside from that, Italian included, what grant funds are out there. So we do oftentimes will be very proactive in trying to find funding for the things that we're doing. And we can certainly get into much more detail about that. So finishing up, again, here is the schedule coming into next week. Now, we can change these topics around, but the draft that I'm proposing to you would suggest that Jeanette would come to you next Tuesday in your workshop session. It actually works in her schedule, so I would like to keep that one set in there. But in terms of who comes to you, what presentations you get, that is, again, a conversation this board can have. I'd suggest, as we get into it a little bit, and what priorities you have, we can certainly decide who's going to best speak to them for you. But again, it could look like, because I think on the agenda set up already is the high school and CTE for January 25th. That would be during a regular meeting, but it could be an opportunity to talk about high school and CTE related things. And then the other budget makers in elementary and middle school, February 1st. You still have February 8th, that meeting, which again, we don't have the agenda set for that. That could be another opportunity to come back to anything you want, because it would be the week after that we would anticipate the board voting on the budget. So that's a quick run through of where we are in the first instance with the budget.
Can I just ask a question? We usually get a percentage of increase or decrease from the city council. Has that come out yet, or are they planning not to do it with the new council?
It's a great question, Nancy. We do not have anything yet. And of course, the council is brand new. And so I suspect that that's a conversation the new council will have. And we may get further guidance as we go through our process here.
Okay. Anyone else have a question?
With that one.
Carrie.
Just curious, within this summary, as we go forward and hear from different budget creators, the positions not in the current budget draft, could we receive more detail on the costs of those, just to consider?
Absolutely, yes.
That's the side. Anybody else? Hope?
Yes. On slide 9, around the enrollment trends for grades PK through 5th, are we seeing projections for any, since we have 3 elementary schools, any particular elementary school or zip codes, or is that just more a combination that they're all equally dropping?
Yeah, so you bring up the very sticky subject of the fact that we have imbalance and continued imbalance among the 3 elementary schools. So while the overall numbers aren't going to change dramatically, we see a decrease. Up until this point, we've seen a decrease at Little Harbor, increase at Dondero have been the headlines of our story. And we suspect that probably will continue and would be a conversation, I think, for this board, aside from budget, right, to how do we deal with that imbalance.
And has that been a 5-year trend, a 3-year trend?
Yeah, I would peg it as a 3 to 5 year trend.
3 to 5 year trend. Okay, so that may be a future agenda item that we can put on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Liz.
Just a couple things. I just want to clarify on that, because that there was a lot of public discussion around numbers dropping, but some of the numbers, my understanding was some of the numbers were skewed because of COVID and people pulling their kids out of school. So I just want to be clear that these numbers aren't, that these numbers may be a little bit skewed still because of that.
I would think the same thing, Liz,
Okay.
that's why I throw the caution out there that, we'll continue to monitor each year. And we've never seen a huge change from one year to the next. So I give these to you just as a point of context. But although we did reduce some elementary positions last year, 2 positions, we don't typically have huge shifts.
Okay. And then we see the FTE positions that are requesting, and then sort of the would be nice, or the ones that the board has requested previously. But I guess I was wondering about equipment. I've heard just an idea, I guess, for an example, that it might be nice to have a smaller bus over at the middle school to do transport to activities, so we're not having to pay a bus company to do those sorts of things. It would cut costs. Is there a place in the budget for requests like that, and then for us to sort of be able to have a conversation to prioritize those or to understand what we could and couldn't do?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll highlight in in more detail that larger operating number
Okay.
and what's included in that. And Nathan can probably speak to it as well as if he wishes.
Before we go to Nathan, any other questions, comments? Thank you, Steve. Oh, Kerry, go ahead, one more.
So the enrollment numbers, just thinking about the enrollment you said about Little Harbor, New Franklin, and Dondero, a lot of the housing stock we're seeing coming in the city is not Little Harbor area, but more of those catchment areas. And so can you just explain a little more on when you said the estimates are maybe not based on housing stock? I'm just curious what that takes into account and what it doesn't.
Yeah, so what they use is a metric of basically your cohort survival of a population. So as students go through your system, how does that number change from year to year? And they essentially apply a formula to that and look at the number of births in a location and then the number of kindergarten enrollments 5 years later. And so I point that out as their methodology, but what it doesn't include is the in and out migration that might happen for other reasons. And so I do wonder about the developments coming online, particularly, as you say, in relation to which part of the community they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Yes,
I
Liz.
just wanted to follow up. So has there been sort of like a hard request to admin, even into departments like the CTE department and stuff to say, is there equipment that you need? And I guess I just want to make sure that it's, is there a section that says, okay, we've built this into the budget, this is sort of what we're proposing, and maybe a section that's sort of separate that we kind of did with the FTEs to say, we haven't built these into the budget yet. I guess I just wonder if that's there or if we could create something like that.
Yeah, we can. We were able to satisfy most of the operating requests, again, which is why we put it all in. In this instance, we put in those requests that came, and but as we talk to budget makers, we certainly can tease out anything.
And that's what they do when they come to us. They, the art department heads might say, this is a kiln year. I need a kiln at the middle school. It's past its lifespan. So they bring those items to us. If there's additional items, like a bus or something, then that would be something we put in operating, but it would be part of the budget discussion.
Okay, I think we're ready to hear from Nathan.
Poor Nathan.
So Nathan will give you a quick orientation also to your book and anything he wants to elaborate on that he heard there.
Good evening, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Speak a little louder.
Good. Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Listen, if you can't, just turn me off. But I want to go back to Liz's question because there's another element of the equipment question that we will be a little bit late to the game to participate strongly with a new vehicle, for instance. But we participate with the city side of this budgetary process with the capital improvement plan and an element called rolling stock. And rolling stock is a rolling inventory of vehicles. And so when we're talking about rolling stock and CIP, we're obviously far greater scale than the kiln or a computer or a projector or some of those other instructional equipment requests that we might have. In the rolling stock currently, just so you know, we carry all of the pickup trucks and other, heavy equipment like the tractors, the lawn equipment, the groundskeeping, et cetera, that Mr. Lynchy and his maintenance crew has. We also have a couple of vans in the food service program and otherwise, and that probably will be the best place to put something like picking up automobiles, trucks, a vehicle, a van. There's also some law that we have to chase, and we've actually been working hard to partner with other districts in the state and find ways that we can work within the state law to actually have activity vans and the like. It's an interesting twist, and I'm talking and can't see faces to know your reactions if there's follow-up questions, but it's an interesting twist in law that the rec department, the municipalities, your local church or camp can pick up a 15-passenger van or something of that sort and use it, but there's some real restrictions on what schools can do in the movement of students. And so we're working to come up with some creative ways that we can address that and be more flexible. And some of that could be dealt with in our operating budget, but some of it also goes to the city side and gets handled in their CIP.
Okay, thank you, Nathan.
Which is a process, by the way, it's for me and for you, the school district in general, that starts back at the end of September, because we launched that CIP in October, because it starts on the planning board side of the house and moves its way through and will be in front of the city council in, I think, March. Document that you, those of you.
Breaking up on us a little bit, Nathan.
I was dancing, and I apologize. I probably outdid the internet. Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear. We can hear you.
So the book in front of you, it's a traditional document. Many of you have seen it year over year. The summary is the most important tool on the front end, and I will get you some additional information that analyzes some of the changes in the budget that will help. I want to offer an admission that you may have heard about the city's networking challenges last week. We're still working to get ourselves back into the accounting software so that we can pull some of the data that I want to offer up to you, and I'll get that to you in future meetings. But the book in front of you is configured. It's configured against the model of our cost centers, and so the book follows the format of the summary, and you'll confront cost center by cost center under the tabs that are included. First, the schools, which really each cost center, we'll talk more about at your retreat, but each cost center is under the direction and supervision of one of our budget makers, a principal, a department head, or a program director. So you'll see first our schools and then the departments, and special education is a big component of the budget, and then operational support is towards the back end. Within each of those cost centers, you'll see the information is sorted by and led off by salaries and wages, then benefits, and then what we call operating, which is all of those material, the contracted services, supplies, and equipment and the like. What I would encourage is that you start by looking at the summary, and for those new members, contemplate the cost centers and then dig into each of those and look at some of the items as you compare year over year, remembering that, as Steve already said, our budget makers considered 4 years of actual spend so that they could reach back before COVID to get decent trend information. And then they contemplate the programming expectations and plans that they have for fiscal 23. And that goes into the proposed budget as it stands. If you have questions and suggestions or what-if scenarios, I suggest that you send those. If you can put them in an email and send them to Steve and CC me, we'll compile questions and answers so that we can get those back and share them with everybody so that everybody can benefit from the additional information, and you can then add that to your binder. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
Are there any questions for Nathan thus far? Should we keep going? Okay. Continue, Nathan.
Well, listen, you tell me what else you'd like to do or how much deeper, Steve, you'd like to have us go into anything, or if we want to pause and wait till folks can have a chance to digest that for next time.
And I would say, I think as Nathan said, one of the important things would be that, especially with a lot of new eyes onto the budget, that we can consolidate the questions and answer them in an efficient manner. Mm-hmm. So do email me, copy Nathan, any question you would want answered. Again, there's never a bad question. And what we'll do for the benefit of the board, too, is compile answers for all of those things and make sure those get out to you so that, again, we're current with the information. And then as we get into the budget work sessions, it is also helpful sometimes to get particular questions you may have ahead of time, so I can tell those presenters and budget makers what to be ready for with information.
Nancy, I have a question.
Yes.
This might be silly. So obviously we're working with teacher contracts. At the same time, is there pay scales and pay grades somewhere as far as uniform of where these amounts are coming from for teacher contracts?
Yes, so in your budget with the teacher numbers on the website under Human Resources are all of the contracts in the city. And so if you have any questions on pay scales, they'll all be within those contracts.
Okay.
Any other questions? Nathan, I have a question. You were going to break down the ESSER funds proposals for us. When will we get that? You know, your recommendations for how we were going to potentially spend those funds? Is he there?
The questions about
I'm here.
ESSER.
I have that list, and we're working on collecting additional data to back up some of the suggestions. I guess I lean on the superintendent and the board to let me know at which of our meetings we'd like to have that information shared.
I thought we had ESSER as a topic for the retreat.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Thank you.
So just another basic question, I guess. So for capital improvements, I think, that was one thing we were obviously talking about at some point with ESSER, the idea of, that our schools need updated air conditioning systems or systems and, what other items. Is that somehow in the budget, or is that sort of separate capital improvement funds or kind of over time items, or how does that work?
Yeah, so just prior to the new board members coming on board, we had wrapped up a discussion around the capital improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan, rolling 5-year plan each year with the city. So that, at this point now, has been through the planning board, I believe, and then we'll go to the city council this month for discussion. But therein would lie our opportunity, because usually those are projects we're planning for years in advance, in 4 years to come. And so we certainly can come back to where we are with that for the new board members in particular. But for new capital improvement ideas, that would be the vehicle to use them, with the exception, of course, that ESSER funds is still that conversation. And then retreat and however else we want to do it, we absolutely would like to talk about what capital needs could be satisfied by ESSER funds.
So with that said, there's no cost center for capital improvement?
There's no cost center here for capital improvement. There are smaller projects within the maintenance budgets, but no capital improvement.
But you can get the capital improvement plan on the city website.
Yes.
Correct. So if you wanted to see what school plans were in there, it's pretty easy to find what the school improvements are in the CIP, which is on the city website.
Okay.
I don't know, is it under city council or?
That would be under the budget.
Okay.
So essentially, the school board budget is not getting hit with the, when we're looking at school board budgets, it's not getting hit with the CIP numbers. CIP is totally separate. So, as we're saying what the school board budget was, I guess those theoretically, we're pulling from city funds to do those things. But, as far as what's on the books and sort of what people are looking at when they're looking at a budget, those are totally
not in
separate.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. And Nathan will get into it more with the retreat, I'm sure, but there are a lot of things that are unique to us in a city, how we do capital projects in particular. We don't carry the debt, if you will, for bonding. So yes, so there are some advantages because the city in their budget carry those things that a normal district would be carrying.
Hope.
Steve, since you guys are compiling the list, if we have identified things as presentations have been given to us over the course of the pandemic, should we email that to you or to Nathan, just to make sure that those things get added to the list?
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
Very good. Okay.
Sorry, one more procedural sort of question here. So as we're going through this process, if we do identify things like Hope said that aren't in this packet, how do we go about? Do we just get does Nathan update it and give us a new sheet at the next meeting or something to that extent, and then we kind of see where we're at there?
Yeah, typically we'll give you a running summary of our discussion, what things have been added, what things have been taken out.
Okay.
What I like to do with this is use the sticky notes, and if I have a, you come back and your book is full of these sticky notes coming out, and then you can ask questions, if you have any question at all about any of the items. Okay. Nathan, thank you.
Can we keep Nathan on, though, to follow up about the bus
Oh, yeah, he'll
route
be on,
issues?
yeah.
Okay.
Staying on.
Where are we now? Are we talking about our workshop session?
No, that was kind of what Nathan,
Oh, that's what Nathan just did. Okay, and he did the cost center overview. Okay, now we'll move on to the superintendent report.
yeah, so mostly just to, first of all, talk through the school as we've seen it since our last break. As you're well aware, we're in the middle of a fairly significant surge with Omicron and everything else, as every district is. And so there have been a number of questions that have been sent to me in terms of where we stand in terms of absences, strain on staffing, et cetera. And I would say, again, I just have to give kudos to multiple groups, starting with our nurses. Our nurses, for others who maybe were enjoying last Friday's snow day, the nurses were working feverishly all day because DHHS had just come out with new guidance around isolation and quarantine. And so obviously that impacts us as well. We do align with New Hampshire DHHS for many of the protocols and guidelines and decisions we look to. So essentially reducing the isolation quarantine period from 10 days to 5 days if certain conditions are met. So they had to work through and tease out how exactly that applies to us. And so I think at this point, every building nurse has sent out to their community where that is, what that looks like. And I would say if parents have any questions, do not hesitate to contact the nurse for clarification around that. But there was certainly a lot of contact with parents, with students in quarantine, and how that impacts their return to school. But overall, I would say, we certainly did see an increase in student absences. We're a little better this week than we were last week. We're running about 10 to 15% students absent as a whole across the board. But again, that number has been gradually decreasing. And staff, the same. The staff has been is very school dependent. So some schools seem to be faring fairly well. Others are seeing a bigger strain. New Franklin in particular right now is strained by staff absences. And again, Joanne over there is doing everything she can to find ways to cover. We've reinstituted regular meetings across the district administrative team, trying to share strategies and resources as best we can to where those pressure points are most acute. And so I would say, again, kudos to those folks figuring out the solutions day to day in their building, what's going to work. We do not want to entertain remote learning in any significant way. We are not looking to, to make any such move, and certainly staffing is a key piece to that. So it's very situational and dependent on the school, but everybody, if I could just use the word, is pitching in to help keep things moving forward. So right now, we're in an okay place in most everywhere, and again, we're hopeful that this is a surge that will gradually decline as well. And just because it's come up on a few questions, and you do see certain schools across that have had to institute some closures or remote learning. I think Nashua being one this week. I would point out that the Department of Ed does not support remote learning as an instructional strategy that counts towards your days in school. So if we were to say we're going to take a day and do remote learning, the problem with that is, for one, the DOE would not count that as a day of instruction. So that's just a decision that they've made. And so what we would do, if forced into it, would be to use targeted, remote need. And so if we notice, say, third grade at a particular school is hit really hard, and we feel absolutely that has to go remote, those kinds of targeted and temporary strategies can be used. But the DOE has certainly taken a stand that you can't just say we're going to stop and go remote for 2 days. So you may have noticed in situations like Nashua, they actually have said we have to make these 2 days up at the end of the year. That's different, by the way, than snow days. So snow closures still, and we may see one of these or two of these, still could be a remote day. and count. So if we get hit with a few more snowstorms, be prepared. We may be leveraging remote learning so that we're not racking up days that we have to actually make up. So anyway, but in terms of COVID, again, I would say the highlight is people are doing every single thing they can to make sure kids are safe with all of the protocols that we have. We certainly want to make sure the message continues to be sent that we have to be vigilant. And parents, we really need to be vigilant around any symptoms. Testing is critically important. And again, our nurses are working overtime constantly around the issues that are popping up in their building. So that's a quick COVID update. I don't know if I want to pause there before we wrap up.
The substitutes.
Oh, yeah, and so substitutes is something we, and I think, Liz, you had brought this up too, which is around, is there any way we know staff is strained, is there any way we could actually increase substitutes? The obvious problem is we don't see a lot of people coming in to new wannabe substitutes, but we are increasing substitute rates. We are just announced it today, increasing by $20 for substitutes to come in, which is the largest increase we've ever done in any one time. We would like to make a bit of a splash of that and hope that it draws in some new substitutes to the pool, but also at the very least does acknowledge that these folks are also coming in day after day in strained situations where they might typically be told to cover a typical schedule. Now they come in and get told they have to cover the typical schedule and this, that, and the other thing. So we do hats off to them, but we are increasing the sub rates as of when, George? Monday.
Thank you.
Tuesday technically, but yeah.
That was a request made by Liz earlier in the week, so thank you.
And just to follow up with that request too, I did
Liz,
actually.
hold on for a second.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I want Ann's had her hand up.
I was
here for a while.
asking about testing. They were doing testing in the schools, and it was getting off to kind of a slow start. I wondered if that's any improved.
Yeah, and that's something we may have to come back to. We definitely see limitations in what our provider is able to do right now. And we would love to expand what we're doing. It's still there, and it's still an opportunity, but for those, we would love to, I guess, think about expanding that.
Can I follow up?
Why don't we let Liz go and then
Yeah, I was just gonna,
Lisa.
I do have other follow-up questions, but with the substitutes, I did get somebody reach out and ask, what are the qualifications for substitutes? Which, I kind of have an idea of what qualifications are, but I think there might be this perception that people need to have some sort of background in teaching or something like that. So could you just briefly give what the requirement would be for somebody? And I guess I also wondered if we could reach out to PTAs at all. I mean, there's a lot of volunteers within PTAs. Could volunteers substitute? I guess would be another question I have.
Yeah, so, and the answer to that is yes, although we would love to pay them.
Yeah.
So we certainly, if there's a parent out there or whomever who might be interested in subbing, by all means, it's not a big process to get on our sub list. It's simply an email to me with a qualifications, filling out the application online. The criteria, Liz, is not any education degree, is not, you have to have that. We typically have looked to see that they have a bachelor's degree, but I would say in all honesty right now in our current situation, if they don't, we'll look at other factors and still on a case-by-case basis approve folks to be substitutes.
Lisa, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to just follow up on Ann's testing question, because I think there's a lot of confusion among parents right now. There was talk earlier in the year about convenient MD being an option for people. And I do hear from a lot of people who will say, I need to test my kid and it's taking like 72 hours still to get a result. And that's maybe not contributing to all those absences, but it might be some. So I just wondered where that stands. And also for the testing that's being done on site, particularly at elementary, if there's any thought about doing that during the school day. Because it's hard for parents to leave work to accompany to get their kids and then come back to test.
Yeah, we've heard those concerns too, Lisa, and so we're working with Convenient MD to see how we can expand schedules.
Right.
When we lock that schedule in, what has happened, I think, is across the state, the need has grown so much that the capacity just is not there, but we're trying. And we've actually wondered about pursuing another vendor to add to that as well. So yes, we hear that concern, and hopefully we'll have a good answer for it soon.
Kerry, and then Hope.
Just a federal requirement. I know that the school's been really good about putting out information, but as of Saturday, people can get reimbursed from their private insurers, which is going to be required by the federal government. So for those that the cost is an issue, now the next check is finding rapid test kits, but for families that's a struggle for. I know that some of the nurses have been doing overtime running tests to folks' houses and things like that need them. So it'd be great just to get information out there.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's other testing options that could even be done in-house that are more accurate, like PCR testing, which do have some investment, but I think that'd be great to pursue if that's of interest.
Yeah, and the state has been supportive of helping us. And our hats off again to Chris Burke, our wellness coordinator. She's taken multiple trips to Concord just to pick up what tests are available that can come back to our schools. And yeah, we know that's a strain point, but it would be good to get more information out there. I'd have to follow up on the insurance, what information we can get out there, but that would be good.
Sure.
Hope.
So I just have a few follow-ups, but I think they're pretty quick. So regarding testing, I'm not looking for the conversation tonight, but can we make sure that we add that to our retreat conversation around, I don't know if you guys already have it on your list to look into particularly cost of PCR machines for our district, or buying up more tests as you were just discussing, or trying to get more from the state or whatever. But I would like to have a broader conversation around testing investments, because I don't see this being the last surge or last wave of a pandemic. And then I was just curious around the absentees. You mentioned that there's a little bit of a return to students. How are we doing with staff absentees, especially some of the ones that were a little bit longer? And I just have a quick follow-up.
Yeah, let me let George answer that because he's looking at it right now.
Okay.
Similar. Staff is seeing a similar decline this week as opposed to last week. We had, I've been saying to Steve all year, we used to see numbers of peaking at like 40 on a Friday, and all this year we've had numbers of about 40 on a Tuesday, and then you look at them. I look at them tonight, and I know they'll be larger tomorrow. But right now, today we had 11 or 24 people out total. Tomorrow we have 17. Wednesday or Thursday we have 8. So it those numbers will change a little bit, but they've all been in, when I look the night before, typically in the upper 20s the past couple weeks, and so they're all down.
So I just have a follow-up regarding staff substitutes, especially around some of our staff that's been out with illness or caregiving for longer subs to come in. I don't know what our protocol and procedure is for integrating a sub into the classrooms, besides maybe just here's your classroom. But I would like to put the request in that we have a little more in-depth conversation with subs so that they can be more familiar with how that classroom runs from the current teacher that is housing it, and that there's not significant changes from how the classroom operates or how I know, for instance, at PHS, there's been times where a longer sub has come in and taken away small group projects that a normal teacher has integrated into the classroom. So this isn't just normal standard classrooms. These kids have projected themselves to a lot of anxiety and trauma in the last 2 years. So I just want us to make sure that the change of having a new teacher, especially at the high school level for 10 days or so, that we're doing whatever we can to integrate small changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds very situational.
Yes. So again, I don't know what our process is for having a sub come in and integrate, but I just think it would be great if they could be a little more aware of what the current circumstances are within the classroom. For everyone does different procedures, I know, to some degree. And then last, I was just wondering, how are we handling makeup for students that are having to quarantine for longer periods of time, especially at the higher levels? I know elementary is a little easier to do makeup work since we're not doing remote or anything like that. How is that being handled currently?
You're nodding. I'm seeing Kim nodding. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, no, we have been doing some remote, so.
Oh, you have.
At the high school, I mean, it's not mandatory, but I think we're all trying to pitch in, as Steve was saying, and asking kids to please Zoom if they're well enough. But part of the problem is they're sick, so they're not remote for reasons that we had last year. Some of them are sick and they can't Zoom. But I have the Zoom open, and hopefully kids show up sometimes. And when they do, I'm really happy. But, yeah, so, and then we have the flex block, and we're allowed to start scheduling makeup flexes. So if, say, physical science, there's certain kids that were out, we just block it for physical science, and we use it as a remote teaching to the students at home, or kids that were out can come in at the same time. So we put that into our schedule as well at the high school.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions, Liz?
Yeah, I have a couple. So when you say that there's strain, like what does that look like? Are we, I know that principals are covering classrooms. I'm sure you guys are probably covering classrooms. Are we going to be losing some things while we're doing that? Like, is there going to be, I guess, if a principal and admin are covering, is there going to be something missing to be able to do that?
Yeah, I would say if it were the long haul, yes. But I think people are pitching in the day, in the moment that they can and they need to. I haven't witnessed any great lapse of other administrative oversight or anything else that we're missing right now. But what oftentimes is principals are working together to fill the holes. So maybe a paraprofessional is watching class over here, and or we're getting an intern to cover somewhere over here. So a lot of that kind of organizational piece is, I know, the first hour of most principals' day right now.
And then is there some sort of backup plan as far as, obviously we don't want to go remote, and, I'm thinking there's obviously these flex blocks. Is there opportunity where teachers are out that they could coordinate with the substitute and, teach the class remotely? I know like bigger schools are obviously, I've sort of been following it a little bit, but some of them are creating super spreaders because they're basically putting all the kids in the auditorium and then telling them to jump on their computer because they have somebody watching, and then they're able to access the teacher remotely. So I don't obviously want to get into that situation, but are there sort of backup plans in that way, instead of moving a grade remote and having...
Yeah, we have had, again, on a limited basis, again, situational based on the context. Sometimes the teacher will Zoom in.
Okay.
But we have tried to avoid the corral and the cafeteria as best we can, yeah.
But we're doing that now with not the corralling, some cases in the high school, but like New Franklin second grade teachers are down, but they're both Zooming in. We have a sub in the room, and the teacher is Zooming in instruction.
Okay, so that seems to be working okay.
Yeah, and again, it's situational and it's spots. It's when we can staff it that way, and of course, if someone's well enough to do it. But in that case, it's been a prolonged. They're on the back end of the 10-day, and they've been doing that.
I have one last question. So there's been a lot of talk online, or amongst community members, about what's the policy for testing and whatnot. I know obviously there was a change. And we're saying talk to the nurse's office, but there's some concern that each nurse's office is giving different, or even the same nurse's office is giving different information for, each child. I think, a lot of this is situational, but I just didn't know if you could elaborate as far as policy goes. We are working on a policy that we established, or the prior board established. That is a policy, and these are sort of guidelines. Is there an opportunity to update any sort of policy to make sure that to make it uniform, or is that not going to be a good decision to do that because it's sort of situational? I guess I just want to make sure that one kid with this, my kid goes in with a stuffy nose. It doesn't get sent home, but somebody else's kid does, so I want to make sure that there's sort of an equity piece to this too, that it's sort of being applied across the board.
Yeah, so first of all, the difference between protocol and policy. So,
Okay.
and I think the policy committee early on had this discussion, which is that we wouldn't change as a matter of policy every time we have to change the protocol because we'd never catch up. But the policies refer to adoption of the protocols guided by DHHS, instituted by our nurses. Our nurses is probably the tightest team that we have. And so I would call into question the notion that it's being applied differently or that nurses may have different understandings. They meet so often and they go through this. In fact, the piece I put out from the nurses this past weekend, the last piece, which detailed in pretty good detail the protocol for returning and the testing requirements, that is applied across the board equally.
Okay.
In terms of they also have a professional discretion though too. So in terms of diagnosing symptoms and knowing when a child does or doesn't need to get sent home, that's a judgment call oftentimes by the clinical observation of the nurse.
Okay, we need to wrap this up. So we'll take Hope and Kerry, and then I think we should
Steve,
move
you
on.
mentioned that Chris had gotten tests from the state. I'm just curious, since the Convenient MD partnership hasn't exactly worked out as we had hoped, if someone is having trouble finding a test or getting in for a test to get their kid back in, is it the nurse they know? Because I hate to, I just wonder, is there something that can we offer? Do we have tests to offer? Because I don't want to bombard nurses suddenly that they're getting calls of like, do you have a test? And I do know that social media has been helpful. I've given out a couple of myself of people, passing around or saying, does someone have one? But what can we, is there anything that we can do, or people, who should they call?
Yeah, again, and again, not to overburden them because but this is their life. So
I know,
I would
but
say
I
contact
don't.
your nurse because the nurses do have some
Okay.
that they try to use when necessary. As I said, we are monitoring what else we can get from the state.
Okay, because we certainly wouldn't want a kid to have to stay out.
No, exactly.
Because of that,
Right.
so, but yeah, those poor nurses.
And Kerry, can you wrap this up for us?
I just felt compelled to sort of back up the nurses, and I hear the same thing from folks around, my kid had a stuffy nose, your kid had a stuffy nose, why is mine out? But then once I talk to them more it's all about clinical assessment and those skills, and so I just think it's a time to all of us as parents, school board members, whoever, community members, to back them up, and they are doing the best they can. But also be conscious that they do want to help, like things with test kits and all of that. They all want all our kids in school as well, shockingly. So I think just supporting them and trying to, move those things forward.
If they're in school, it's less paperwork for them.
Yeah,
For
exactly.
sure.
I think, do we all have the tests that you go online and just put in your zip code and they send them to you in the mail? I just got 4 the other day, so don't forget to do that, and then you can just test.
Well, I think it was today or yesterday, they are all sold out again, or all, but there should be some coming from the
Yeah,
federal
that's what I
government,
heard.
think,
There's
too.
more coming.
And I would just give a shout out, it goes a long way to just send a note to your nurse or a teacher
Yep.
or any other staff or student.
Just saying thank you.
And just saying thank you, like we see you, we know this surge is really hard on you.
It's a new world we're living in, that's for sure. Okay, Steve.
So just to finish up the superintendent's report then is quickly, I would notice that the January 25th meeting, which was originally scheduled for the high schools, are going to be in conference room A right over there. And that is because we will continue to offer a Zoom-in opportunity for the public. And so we're going to limit our meetings to facilities that have the easiest capabilities to do that. That would be this room and conference room A. So January 25th, we'll be in conference room A. We just want to make sure everybody knew that. And then you have just a quick summary of the little email correspondence in your packet and the board and administrator January edition. And that is the superintendent's report.
Can I ask a question about the newsletter from the board and administrator? On the last page of the board administrator letter, it talks about using a committee report to enhance organization efficiency. Do we currently have committee reports set up like this? They
Not
report
in
out?
a format uniform across, but it could be a conversation.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Kerry.
I also wanted to point out that report would be helpful, and also just ask if the superintendent search committee could comment on the limits, or I think the process related to one of the email correspondence.
That email.
I thought there were no emails.
You had
Yeah, it came in the second. It was
Oh, yeah.
updated the other day, Nancy.
What was that?
Maybe just a recap of the process and,
We can do that during
Yes.
committee updates. Yep.
okay, thanks.
During committee updates, we'll do that.
Great.
Okay, let's move on to consideration and approval of policies. Second reading.
So yes, you've seen all of, well, again, new board members aside, you've seen all of these for first reading. I think, and Nancy, you could direct this, but I think the crisis prevention emergency response policy will pull from this list, send it back to policy, because similarly with the agenda item where we were going to talk, I think first conversation, if I'm understanding the email today correctly, would be with policy tomorrow and then to come back to the board. So I would recommend you consider all of the other policies as a bulk and take a first vote and or a motion and then discuss anything of any of them you'd like to.
So which one are we taking out, the drug-free?
I think of the crisis prevention and emergency
Oh,
response.
okay. Okay, can we take these as a block then? Does anyone have any questions about drug-free workplace, drug-free schools, ADB/GBEC?
I have one comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Number 5, it says will provide to. I think it should just say will, so I think it's more of a typo issue.
Yep.
So take the word provide to out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we do that and still
Yep.
pass the policy? Okay.
Thank you.
I'll take it.
Thank you, Liz. That happens with words and all that other stuff. Anyone else have a comment about this policy? Should we, you want to
Why
do
don't we
them as
just
a
run
block?
through them and then
Okay.
we'll vote at once?
Okay, the next one is the crisis prevention we're pulling out. The next one is fire and all hazard drills, EBCB. Does anyone want to comment on that? Okay, let's move on to the next one, student rights and responsibilities, JI. Any comments about that one? The next one, student conduct, JIC.
I have comment on that. Nancy.
Okay, yes, go ahead, Liz.
The first sentence there, I'm wondering if we could remove that.
What was that again?
The student conduct policy, the first sentence of the policy under A, general policy, it's kind of seems like dicta to me as far as, I just don't want anybody to base any sort of comments to children on this. It basically says students are expected to conduct themselves in a manner fitting to their age level and maturity and with respect to consideration of other students, school department personnel, and other members of the community. I think we can remove it. The only reason why I ask is because I feel like it's not fitting for disabilities, asking a kid to act their age. It's kind of like an old school type of thing, I feel like. Obviously I'm not an educator. I know educators tend to be the ones to use this policy with children and say, are you acting like a, third grader, are you acting like a fourth grader? But some of the kids that have behavioral issues, I don't know. I just wondering if we could strike that first sentence. I think it is dicta. I don't think it's substantial to anything.
Well, I would say it seems a little redundant with the, I think the second
Yeah.
sentence says
Yeah.
much the same, so I don't see a problem with it personally, but.
And then my only other concern with this policy is the last section. It's section E. In the last sentence, it says a child with a disability. But in the other parts, it says is disabled, rights to disabled students. And so we're not using, person first language there. And the last sentence does. So I don't know if that's because the statute they're defined as disabled under the statute, or if we could make that more person first, like the last sentence where it says a child with a disability.
Yeah, I would say, and again, and I know we said this in first reading, all the changes that have happened here have been in alignment with updating to laws and,
Okay.
and things, but to your point, the consistency of that language structure, I don't think is a bad thing at all.
Okay.
Excuse me, Steve, just to follow up on that, is that language compatible with the language that Jeanette has proposed for special ed now? Because I thought there was a language change in using the word disabled.
Yeah, no, it's consistent. Yeah.
Okay.
So can you just, what are those changes?
So,
again? Oh, okay.
rather than say a disabled child, say a child with a
a
disability.
disability. Okay. And then we're taking out the first sentence.
Yes.
Yes.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll include this in the block then. The next one is suspension of a pupil, JICD. Any comments about this one?
I have a question regarding, it says B, standards and procedures relative to the disciplinary consequences, and then it labels them 1, 2, 3, removal from classroom, restrictions from school activities and detention. Are we saying that, and then 4, temporary reassignment, school reentry plans? For 1, 2, and 3, are those if the situation escalates only that you're rolling through those?
Yeah, the big change in this is in each of these cases, we are required to show the intervention mechanisms before the discipline.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, can you just reference where you were?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in JICD, suspension of
Suspension of
pupil in
pupil.
the first page,
Section
under
B.
section B,
23 in the PDF page.
page 23 in the PDF.
I have a question about some of these policies. Recess, using recess as a tool for discipline, has come up. It's come up certainly for me and my family. I guess I just wonder, I don't see recess as a tool, an intervention in any of these policies. I'm wondering if there's a way that we could explicitly state that children shouldn't be, unless they're a serious safety concern, that recess shouldn't be a tool.
Is recess in here?
We have that
We have that
policy
as a
in
policy.
another,
That's right.
it's a
We have
separate
separate
policy.
policy?
It's a
Yes.
separate
Okay, it's
policy.
just not
yeah.
under these sorts.
That recess cannot be taken away as a
Right.
disciplinary measure. That was passed 2 years ago.
Okay, well, I guess maybe we need to notify the elementary schools.
Interesting.
This particular policy is driven by a lot of the changing laws around what we're required to do prior to any suspension.
Okay.
Okay, so we're okay with that one. All right, may I have a motion to approve all of these policies except for the crisis prevention and emergency response plan?
We're tabling that one.
Yes, we're tabling
So
that
we're
one.
taking a motion to table that one and approve the others.
Or refer that to
Do we need
policy
a motion to
committee.
table?
You could take the motion to approve all but, and then table
Yeah.
the other.
All right, well, let's have a motion to table EBCA, crisis prevention and emergency response plans.
So moved.
Margot, second. Okay, we have to do a roll call.
I think you can just voice vote.
For this?
Once it
Yeah.
has
Okay.
second, yeah.
Voice, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we need a motion to approve all the others.
With the amendments.
With the amendments.
With the
With
change.
the-
Yes, with the changes.
So moved.
Hope,
I'll motion first.
and who's second? Liz?
Liz, yep.
All in favor? Aye. Do we need a roll call for that one? With Pip?
Yeah, let's do a roll call.
Okay, we'll do a roll call for that one.
Liz Barrett,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes. Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Clayberg,
Yes.
Hope Van Epps.
Yes.
Brian French.
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on to new business, and we have the exciting event where we appoint a Board of Ethics member from the school board.
So in this folder here are the names of every board member. All I see is Ann Walker, Ann Walker. I think you're all in here.
You stuffed only my name in.
All right, so I am going to give the honors to Mr. Shea,
Come on.
so you can blame him.
All right.
You all have your list of committees, so we can all write in. The winner is,
Winner of the Ethics Committee, which hopefully will never
You
be
should see
called,
it as a win.
is Margot Peabody.
Congratulations.
congratulations, Margot. I'm sure you'll do a great job.
Now, is there an active complaint right now?
No, it's only if called
Oh,
upon.
okay. All right, I thought there was an active complaint.
There's only been one.
I wonder what
Only
it
been
is.
one.
All right.
Yeah. It's a month of my life.
That's what we're going to defer to policy.
Oh, I see, okay. The crisis management and communications is deferred to the policy committee. Consideration approval of futures bylaws.
So as you heard in the presentation from Jenny, the Futures Advisory Board has been active, and in your packet, you had some revisions to the bylaws. You know, every once in a while, they revisit the membership of the advisory board. Previous, it had been fairly prescriptive over exactly what kind of role each person would serve, and I think the board ran into some difficulty finding people with the particular area. So I think a general change was to make it a little more general, to weight it a little more towards community members, less towards staff. And so there aren't any major changes. And again, this is just a guiding document for the advisory board themselves.
And do we have a motion to approve the Future Advisory Board bylaws?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, do we need a roll call?
We do.
Okay, we need a roll call.
Liz Barrett,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Kleber.
Yes.
Hope Van Epps.
Yes.
Brian French.
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is the approval of the future board members, two new future board members, James Fahey, who's an alumnus of Futures, and Liz Nickerson, who is Joe Sartell's granddaughter, Joe and Jean Sartell's granddaughter.
Move to approve.
Second. Oh, good, thank you. Roll call?
Sure.
Okay, roll call.
Liz Barrett,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Ann Walker.
Yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Kleber.
Yes.
Hope Van Epps.
Yes.
Brian French.
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Okay, we're on to committee, thank you, Steve. We're on to committee updates. Do we have any committee updates? Hope?
So the search committee just wanted to update that the deadline for applications will be tomorrow. We currently have, before this meeting, around 17 applicants. And we will begin to narrow those down and, yeah, so.
Okay, so you'll keep
in
us
process.
informed and.
Yes, we
Margot?
will definitely keep
Okay.
you informed. Right now, I should just note to people that we are in a more confidential protection of applicants, so there won't be as many updates posted as before.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Nancy,
Yes.
can we ask questions about that?
Yes, of course you can.
Carrie, did you want to follow up with your question?
Yeah, I think one of the communication pieces was just whether within this process, and I think within this process, whether there is an opportunity with a new board and to look at the applicant pool to possibly extend a contract to currently employed folks. If you could comment on that?
I'm sorry. Did a current person, if they apply, is that what you're asking?
No. So could within this process and the search process, a contract be offered to a current superintendent?
How is the committee set up, Hope? Is it set up?
Are you asking that a
you
current
have
superintendent that has applied, or? I'm not sure I
I'll-
fully
can I ask
understand your
I'll ask
question.
it. I'll ask it. My question is, at what point in this process would the committee suggest that the board consider the current superintendent versus the applicants?
Our
I don't
current,
know if any.
did you say the current superintendent? So our current superintendent has not applied for this position.
I don't know that. I guess I'm wondering if an application is necessary in that. As part of the process, if somebody's current, I mean, at what part of the process can we take a look and give the current superintendent an offer?
I
Could we
guess my
reconsider?
answer would be if we feel that none of the candidates meet the criteria that we're looking for, and we feel that our current superintendent meets that criteria, then we would offer him a contract. That would be my answer to the question. But I think we have to examine the applicants that have come in before we make that decision. But I think that decision could definitely be made.
So as the search committee and that discussion, it has been, we have current applicants. Those current applicants will be reviewed and interviewed, and we will go through that process. And if at that point we do not find anyone, we would come back to the board to have a discussion around what those options would be, because we can't assume that the current superintendent is not as engaged in any other searches at this time either. So there could be multiple options to that. There could be interims, there could be the current superintendent. It would depend on what the situation was at that time and stay with our current superintendent. So that would be a board discussion that we would have of all options.
And I think it has to be kept confidential because once you become a finalist or close to the finalists, you have to notify your school district that you're involved in the search. So I think at this point, we're definitely going to keep it under wraps. Right now, it's just with the search committee. So we'll just see how that develops. But it's good, that was a good question to ask, because I think it's important that we get that out there.
I guess I just wanted to clarify, though, at what point in the process could we halt it and provide an offer to the current superintendent? If that were, the reason why I'm asking is because a lot of the community members, there's been a lot of community members that have reached out to me, staff that have reached out to me, admins that have reached out to me, or that I have reached out to. And I'm concerned that given the current climate that we're in with COVID and everything that we have going on, I think, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater to some extent. I think, having looked at other superintendents across districts as well, I've done my research too. I think Steve has done a really fine job, and I think, there's sort of opportunity there. I was not part of the last board, so I did not get to make a decision about moving forward with a superintendent search process. And I guess I just don't want to get too far into the weeds with the superintendent search process before possibly making a motion or doing something to extend a contract to Steve. So I guess I'm wondering if you could, from the committee, is there a certain date that would be a good date to sort of
Can I just interject real quick? So we have extended a contract to Steve. It's for 1 year. Now we're under contract for a search, and we are supposed to meet tomorrow to bring onboarders on up to date fully in the process, so I'm happy to address that more. But I would certainly look to Steve for his comments, but as of his last statement, and he can speak for himself, he was looking. And so we are under contract right now to look. We will continue to look, and we will continue to go through this process. At which time, as I stated, if the process does not reveal the necessary findings or that we feel is needed for our district, then we will review with the board, as with our current superintendent, all options at that time. So if we cross that bridge, we may not even cross that bridge.
I
understand what you're asking, Elizabeth. Liz, I truly understand what you're asking, and what I'm saying to you is it's not this time. That time has not been identified because we may not even come to that time. There's a two-way search going on right now.
Okay.
So, Steve, I don't know if you would like to comment for clarification. That might be helpful.
Yeah, so I think obviously the board's involved in a search process, and I would say, following through with that, I would think that any other conversation would happen after that process, and we would go from there. And if the board has other conversation that you want to dive into it, I would suggest perhaps having a non-public and talking about some of.
Right.
I suggest a non-public.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Exactly. Okay. Okay, we can talk about that more. Okay, yes.
So clearly there are being a lot of concerns raised. So even if the search committee continues as planned, do you know, or do you have a date at present as to when we would know more about what's being implemented? Because I know there's a need for secrecy now, but when could we know that?
It's not necessarily secret. It's just protecting the confidentiality of applicants. We've been very transparent. So,
I know.
But in terms of the process, like I said, we close tomorrow, and then we will be starting to go through short interviews and then narrowing those down and going through, hopefully, bringing forth names to the board around that February timeframe, as we had discussed with the board
before.
Okay.
And so, but as far as, we don't have a confirmed hire date just yet, because it will depend upon applicant schedules for being able to schedule those interviews, so give or take. And with COVID right now, you know, one day you have someone and the next day they're out on COVID. So we're just having to be a little more adaptable and flexible with the timeline than we normally would. Does that answer your question?
I believe it does, yes.
Okay, so, yeah.
Is this
Okay.
on a retreat, Nancy, as far as just having a discussion about this? Is that part of the retreat as well?
I don't believe so, because our retreat is public. This has to be a non-public discussion, so we can
Okay.
schedule a non-public
Okay, yeah, if you
meeting
could do
around
that.
this. And we'll rely on Hope and Margot to tell us when there would be a good time to have that meeting.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we will do that. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Hope and Margot. Any other committees that would like to? I have one. Kim, why don't you give the report? You were there.
I was.
Yes, we'll let
But
Kim
Mr.
give the
Shea was
report.
there as
Are
well.
we talking Portsmouth 400?
We are.
Portsmouth 400.
We're talking the big
It was
holiday
very,
bash.
very exciting. So Kim, you give the report.
Okay, and then you guys can jump in. So Marlon Pinto is an amazing student at our school, and he is rallying the education committee around a walking app for Portsmouth, where it will be a very cool thing. And there's a lot of people jumping in, thinking about, oh, well, this stop could be this, and this stop could be that. So they're also talking about the historical,
Oral histories.
thank you, oral history like StoryCorps, where different spots, perhaps there'll be, you know, either a pop-up video of someone speaking or something that you're looking at while someone's giving you an oral history. We also talked a lot about murals. So I know student rep from the Youth Council for the NAACP was there, and she's the president of the Seacoast Youth NAACP Council, and she's talking about working with Black Heritage and doing something about diversity. And someone else was jumping in about immigration and people who have come to our city and worked to make it a better place. And then the Eco Club was there talking about how we could talk about how we're an eco municipality, how the environment, like the maritime piece, has played a huge portion of economic development, but also the appreciation that we do have some great natural resources. I've probably missed something, so I'm going to turn it over to George and Nancy.
Yes.
George,
thank you for being there too. George.
Yeah, those are the two big initiatives. It has a lot of involvement. We had excellent student energy around it. And prior to this, it's really just been Marlon, the poor guy, who's an amazing kid, by the way, who's pretty much shepherding a lot of this work now, and has brought in a bunch of Portsmouth High School kids. They have excellent energy, great ideas, and just what you want to see. You have that sort of student autonomy and drive. They're taking the reins of a lot of this now, and moving away from us adults who like to sit around and meet. They're actually doing things. It's awesome. So.
It was a great meeting.
Yeah.
A lot of enthusiasm by the high school. It made you proud to know that we're all connected in some way to Portsmouth High School by being on the school board. And they also talked about getting the elementaries and the middle school involved too. So that was, and just an idea came up with a welding club at the high school would make a sculpture that would be permanent in the city of Portsmouth. So it was really a cool meeting. So they're meeting again, if anybody wants to, I zoomed in, the second Monday of February at 3:45. So I don't know what's the second.
It's at the Nichinon Theater.
Yeah, at the Nichinon Theater in the high school, and they also offered the Zoom. So a lot of excitement. I was high when I came out of that meeting. It was great.
Shout out to Mr. Lister, who is heading the
Yes,
education component. It was nice to see him.
Okay. Thank you. Any other committee updates? Yes, Liz.
Will we get an idea of when these committees are meeting and times? I know, the only one I've seen online really is the policy committee posted, and obviously the rec committee is posted, but I don't think a lot of these committees are posted as far as times that we're going to show up. So,
I think what will happen is they'll notify you when they're having a meeting. I don't think they.
Yeah, I would say
generally-
anybody who's on a committee assignment, you don't know when that meeting is, just contact me.
You'll find out.
Okay. Thank you. Margot, do you want to do that? Yep. Margot's going to talk to us all about, are we finished with committee updates? Go ahead, Kim?
Well, the Equity Council has been meeting, just quick update. We had our last
okay.
meeting on Zoom. Let's see, Liz, you were there. And Lisa, you were there.
I missed the last one,
And Steve was there. So, and Nick, were you there? No.
I don't believe so.
But we had a good turnout. And New Hampshire Listens is leading the charge, getting us to work as a group and talk about sometimes deeper issues that caused a little bit of tension, but it was all good tension in that talking about the language we use and how that represents different perspectives. And that's really important in every piece of equity work. So that's where we left off. So I just update on that.
And you have another meeting scheduled, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? As far as the equity committee goes, is there, obviously there's this sort of bonding aspect of it. Is there ever, is there a point in the plan, or at what stage or time or month will we sort of get into discussing more of particular points of change and whatnot?
Yeah, so I think Steve and I were going to meet very shortly because we're about at halftime, and perhaps consider what's our next step and revisit sort of like what was the objective and when are we going to hit that objective, and are we on our way there, and I don't know, just touch in on that halftime piece. And then, thinking about what you just said, we can talk to New Hampshire Listens and get a better feel for when that piece to the puzzle will be coming up. I know people are anxious to kind of move forward a little bit more. So I guess we just need to meet and then talk to Michelle Holt-Shannon over at UNH.
Yeah, and I would say, as Kim alluded to in our last meeting, it was evident that, this group needs to really get to know each other too, and be able to function together. And so again, thanks to New Hampshire Listens for helping facilitate some of this work. But certainly, we've taken a more gradual approach to saying, let's form a formal equity council. And so I would say the bedrock foundation work, which we're talking about, and we'll circle back to New Hampshire Listens, may take most of this year before we actually say, okay, this is the structure, formal, that's going to go forward.
I just have a quick follow-up on that. So would the intention down the line be for the Equity Council to feed suggestions into the policy committee to try to implement things down the line? I understand the process right now is more of a just kind of centering what the conversation should look like, but is that how it would sort of go next, or what's the thought on how it would start to pivot towards implementation of potential changes? Or
Yeah, I would say both the suggested changes and as our equity policy would identify, we're talking everything from curriculum to professional development to protocols and rules in schools, but also as a filter. So policies that perhaps the policy committee in your example would create could be run as a filter through the Equity Council to really examine them from that lens too.
No, that's helpful. I just wanted to make sure at some point that they're sort of looped in with the other things that are going on, so that it's not just happening over here.
Good question.
Yeah, and I would just say that we are building that foundation.
Oh, yeah, it's been great.
And so the events, we're not going to see the events that you're talking about for a little bit, because we have to build common values and beliefs and systems in order for this to be pulled off successfully. Because if we just work at the event level of like policy making and, we've really done nothing to shift the direction and to have people really believe in the goal.
I fully appreciate that. I just was trying to think down the line.
We'll get there.
Okay. Sorry, one more follow-up. And so with that being said, is there an idea that this would sort of wrap up towards the end of the school year, or that these folks, are committed and we're going to commit to next year as well? I mean, is there, do you anticipate kind of keeping, putting that out to the group that, hey, we can have this opportunity to extend, or I guess I'm just wondering what that.
Yeah, we suspect this process is sort of identifying a core dedicated group that would likely be the heart of what goes forward.
Okay.
And we would we're still hoping to include everyone who has an interest as satellite groups, or however the map of how we communicate and stuff works out.
Right.
However it evolves.
Yes, it's an organic process.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. Kim's really been working very, very hard with this group, and Kim, we're lucky to have you. You're a
Thank you,
wonderful
Nancy. We're lucky to have
addition
you.
to our staff and to our board. Margot's going to talk about the curriculum committee.
Yeah, as Nancy and I sat down to look at the current board committees, and I've been fortunate enough to be having some conversations with Derek Christina, as you know, who's the head of the New Hampshire School Board Association. And one of the things, when he speaks to us at our retreat, one of the things he went over are the roles and responsibility of school board members and, or of the school board. And on that table, which we will go over at our retreat, curriculum is very much in the lane of school board. And one of the things we've heard often, and George has had this conversation many times, and Steve, is the desire as a board for us to have a K through 12 curriculum vision. We are not a school department that has a specific director of curriculum or implementation. But in the history of the board, there used to be a curriculum committee that was absolved. And I would like to propose that we reform a curriculum committee and incorporate into that, taking into what we're doing with the Equity Council and the board goals of really trying to come up with an intentional, transparent, fluid K through 12 curricular plan that incorporates both the mission and the vision of the board, as well as what we all hope to be the outcome of a Portsmouth education. So we had, Nancy and I placed that on there with the proposal that we would have a curriculum committee that would be composed of 2 board members, as well as department chairs, reps from the different age groups. George, lucky you, would probably be the superintendent representative, since that is in your guys. So I would like to propose that that is formed.
I have a question, and where would this committee fall? Is this a standing committee, a temporary specials committee? Because we also, you mentioned director of curriculum, which is something I know that we had talked about. I didn't see it in this current budget proposal, but potential future hiring. So I'm just curious as.
I think that's a great question. Personally, I'm realizing I placed it in the wrong spot. I would see it as a standing committee until we were able to move into a until we were able to incorporate a director of curriculum position in our district.
Okay.
So I am sorry, I placed it under temporary and special, but I do not think that's the right location for it.
It should be a standing committee.
Right.
And then just to reconfirm that it is to advise the district, or, I mean, I would assume there would be department heads. I mean, we have a curriculum director at the high school, but not across the district. So can you just restate what you're thinking its mission?
Yeah, I think we as a board need to define that more clearly.
Okay, so
but
that's still out.
Still out for us to like fine tune,
Yes.
but
Okay.
I think it has to have representation from each age group, right? It has to have an elementary rep of some sort on it, a middle school rep, and some department chair reps from the high school, and it's to try to get us to a clear K through 12 vision of our core competencies, our essential skills, and where is that reflected at which points in the.
And Steve, can you just give the history of it was a committee, curriculum council before, do you mind?
Yeah, George and I were talking about this today. In the history, there has been a group called the Curriculum Council, which has had board representation, actually both from SAU 52 and 50. But it was primarily made up of staff, department heads, other teacher representatives, some administrators. And the struggle we had with it, honestly, and probably the reason it disbanded, was when we would bring an issue to it, it was a standing set group of people. So when we would bring an issue to it, that issue might apply to a third of the people, but it would never really be something broad. I like the idea of a small group, like a policy-ish size committee, who could then bring in, as needed for whatever topic you're talking about, a group of people to inform the discussion. So I think it would be a little different than what we used to have, but it would be targeted.
Thank you for that background.
So what we need is 2 people from the board who would like to be on this committee.
I do have a quick question. I guess I wondered about the remote learning. There was a committee created around that, but it wasn't school board involved. Is there any sort of aspect of that that's, I assume that's sort of defunct now. Is there any sort of aspect of that could be integrated into something like this?
Yeah, Liz, if you're talking about, I know the conversation we had earlier before around what opportunities still exist in our long-term schooling for aspects of remote learning, that would, to me, be a committee that could talk about that.
Yeah, I guess I was sort of referring to the group that had gotten together to create this remote learning.
Yeah,
originally.
that was a subcommittee of our reopening advisory task
Okay.
force, so that was a temporary group, just to talk about remote learning and how we were experiencing it at the time.
Okay.
So Nancy, just to clarify, tonight we just need to vote on having the committee, but those that are interested can email you just like we did with other
Contact
committees.
Margot and me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So can we have a motion that the school board will establish a standing committee called the curriculum committee? Sure. Okay.
Move to approve.
Second. Do we need to do roll call?
Yes.
Okay. Steve will do a roll call.
Liz Barrett,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Clayberg,
Yes.
Hope Van Epps,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Okay, we wanted to address the Woodlands bus stop. So I hand it over to.
Sure. So, well, first of all, in the structure of your agenda, one of the things we talked about was having a section at the end that would be follow-up items, which would primarily be, and it may not be the case tonight, but are there things that have come up just recently and perhaps in public comment that you would want on a future agenda to talk about? In this case, and Nathan can jump in if his internet is strong. But we've been, Nathan has been working constantly with the bus company around stops and changes, and as I alluded to earlier, how do we literally help the buses run on time in the new time constraints we have with the limited buses we have. So there have been some changes. I would want to highlight that there has been some movement and change around that issue in particular. If you think about the horseshoe of the Woodlands, rather than, and I know a couple of the emails you received referred to the only options being Lafayette and Hoover and Elwyn. On the other end, we have established stops closer within the Elwyn neighborhood, so right near Dondero at Van Buren and McKinley. And those stops are very much reasonably located to the people who had expressed the most concern with where they were. So on the one hand, we wanted to be responsive to the concerns we were hearing, which is the 0.7, 0.8, whatever, mile, et cetera, no sidewalk. So we've addressed a good deal of those, but thinking long-term in that neighborhood, there are a number of houses, as you know, and we, from time to time, can't predict accurately who's going to ride the bus and who isn't. And I'll turn it over to Nathan to talk more specifically, because he just had another conversation with the bus company today. But we do think we can make a change, too, to establish stops as they were at TJ Gamester. So, Nathan, did you want to say anything more about that?
No, I mean, I think that's it. I wanted to say thank you to the board for your calls and your feedback, and thank you to this evening's speaker, Ms. Stallkamp, for all of the information that was shared. But based on some of your feedback over the last few days, I've been talking to Ms. Owens, the manager over at our bus company, and we'd recommend that if it please the board, we'll go back to last year's stops in the Woodlands, which is each end of TJ Gamester. We'll also keep the McKinley Van Buren stop that is out just north of the entrance to Dondero, and then we'll continue to have the stop on Hoover that we've had, which is not at Lafayette anymore. It's in at Taft. That one, I think the bus company will recommend we shift to Coolidge, where it was last year as well. And I guess the one comment that I'd like to make, if you're actually hearing me from something that was said before, was that there are stops that we attempted at the beginning of the year, and as Steve just said, we've replaced those and changed them. But the bus company is very careful not to eliminate stops until they're very sure that nobody's using those stops. And some of the stops that were commented on they're not being used in some cases by students any longer, but they're very careful not to drop those off the route until the drivers are confident that nobody is continuing to expect a ride. And then they continue to drive by for some period of time just to make sure that they don't miss any student.
So Nathan, when will that start? Do you have any idea?
I don't dare say tomorrow because it's now after 9 o'clock, but it certainly will be, those stops will be in place by Tuesday when we come back, but it's very likely that they will start this week before the week is out. I'll update the board for your information, and then we'll push out an announcement so that the neighborhood will know.
Nathan, thank you. I know you've worked very hard with our bus company this year, and there's a shortage of bus drivers. We want to get kids to school on time so that you don't disrupt classrooms by having students arrive late. So thank you. I know you've worked really hard, and we appreciate it.
Nancy, I have a follow-up.
Thank you. Thank you and the community for their patience on this one.
All right, two things. First off, I just want to be sure that there's no kids standing on Elwyn and Harding anymore after this. I mean, this is another, and then my next follow-up is, unfortunately, Nathan, my cell phone died when I was talking to you yesterday, and I wanted to follow up because Patriots Park has been standing on Route 1. I think I had called into Steve and George when it first started. I think it's a this year thing, but these kids are standing, Patriots Park's kids are standing on Route 1. They're either standing in the snow by the entrance on Route 1, or they're standing in the median, and on a daily basis, these kids come within a foot of my vehicle, and when you're driving out of Patriots Park, the sun is directly in your eyes. So, it's great that all these folks have brought attention to Elwyn Park and the Woodlands. Unfortunately, I just don't think that, maybe I'm the only one that's going to bring attention to Patriots Park, but these kids have been standing on Route 1, and so I guess I'm wondering if the bus can go in like they do for the elementary and do a turnaround, and if you could follow up on that, please.
So I'll definitely follow up with you. I put that on the radar of the bus company after you and I spoke, and she's getting back to me about what changes, if any, happened with that route this year and the stop there, both elementary and middle and high. And so as soon as I have some response from her, I'll get back to you for sure.
The elementary stop's fine. Elementary, they get picked up right in front of the first building. The bus goes and turns around. It's the middle and high schoolers that are all standing at the entrance 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'm just concerned, especially with the weather. I don't want to be in a situation where we're saying we coulda, shoulda, woulda later on, and these kids are standing on Route 1. So, thank you.
And Nathan, the Elwyn Road in Harding is no longer there, correct?
I'll have to confirm with
I believe
with
that
Ms.
one.
Owens. The reality is that the bus stops at least three times across Elwyn because there have been students presenting both at Grant and at Taft and at Harding, and I appreciate that there are concerns with those stops. I have to tell you that the folks at Student Transportation of America, STA, our bus provider, Nicole is outstanding, and they work very hard to make sure that they locate stops in the safest possible places for students. But they additionally stop at places further down Elwyn because they try to limit the amount of distance that students have to traverse on Elwyn to catch the bus. So I'll confirm with her that she does or does not have students there. They actually come in off Elwyn and pick up at the intersection of Taft and Arthur as well, but I don't know that there have been any takers on that stop of late.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, the final thing I have is our retreat, which is Monday, January 24th from 6 to 9 p.m. And where is it? It's here,
I think
correct?
it's here.
Yeah.
We've identified the school board conference room.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
Just regarding the school bus conversation and being new, I just want to clarify, but in general, the bus stops or safety issues, especially as they come up with winter hazards, the proper pathway isn't to go directly to the school board, right? It's to reach out to administration. I just want to make sure that we're not going to get a slew of bus stop requests because there's another pathway to handle that. But totally appropriate to bring it if it's a safety issue that's not getting handled. I'd like to.
It's not a school board decision, it's
Yeah.
an administrative decision.
Okay.
So, yes, you are correct.
We can discuss it, but we don't really have any power in.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll see everybody on the 24th from 6 to 9 p.m. here, and we are going to get Mo's subs. So Paulette will send out a request, your request.
We should bring our budget books then.
Yes, please bring your budget books, because we will talk about budget. And Margot and I will meet
Stickers on
with
'em if you
Steve
want.
to put together an agenda. So you'll all get an agenda before next Monday. And then we have a meeting next Tuesday also, so we'll be doing a lot of school board next week. Thank
every-
you all.
every
I think,
Tuesday
for
until the
new
budget's
members,
done.
this
No, we
was
don't
a
have something
very
like that coming
productive
up. He's
meeting.
talking about
I
a
think
week
we
from
got a
now.
lot of good
No, I
questions
think
out there that,
It's a holiday.
The 24th is
I'll
not.
make a motion to adjourn.
second.
Right, so she's
We
talking
need a
about the
roll call
following.
for that.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say.
All in
Yeah,
favor
next
of
Monday, we're
adjournment?
retreat. I'm like, no.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good
you.
night. Thank you.